Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. It is beyond heartbreaking what is happening in Palestine. It is beyond humanity what is being shown on our TV screens, and those that live it every day. It's incomprehensible what they must be going through. We'll be talking about the situation in Palestine. We'll be talking about the international community that refuses to move beyond rhetoric and just condemning what's happening in Gaza and Palestine to concrete action. We'll be talking about whether there can be peace for those that live in Palestine, where there can be a solution for those women and children that continue to suffer even as we speak. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me the Palestinian ambassador to Pakistan. Thank you so much for joining us, Your Excellency. And a little later, we also have with us Jauhar Saleem, former Foreign Secretary, President IRS, and Naela Chohan, who's also former Special Secretary, Foreign Affairs. Thank you for joining us. Let me start by going to Ambassador Saab. Your Excellency, like I said, it is beyond comprehension what is continuing to happen. But in your opinion, as the situation stands at this time, do you see the world moving towards a solution in Palestine quite simply?
First of all, thank you very much for having me in your screen. And my thanks for all Pakistani people, for the government of Pakistan, for their solidarity and their keen support. That support is really, really matter for us, the Palestinians, and give us strength. Regarding the situation in general, let me tell you, the Israelis have the umbrella from the Americans, have the umbrella from the Western. We have the support from the whole world, including from the people of those states. It means the Western countries, whom supporting the Palestinians. The issue here is not just the genocide that going on. This genocide not started from 7th of October. This genocide started from day one of the creation of the State of Israel, implementing their policies for ethnic cleansing. They want to erase the Palestinians, the Palestinian history, and now it's the time for international community, for all the states to take a real action. It's not enough just to deny. It's not enough just to ask for ceasefire. It's the time to take action to give the Palestinians their rights to have their own state and to be independent like all the peoples in the world. This last occupation that we are witness with all its atrocities should be ended. It's enough.
You're right, Ambassador Saab, Your Excellency, that it is enough. But what about a solution as far as UN is concerned, as far as international peacekeeping organizations is concerned? Of course, the US for a while we thought would intervene and it would be a solution. But as things stand today, do you think that the global powers can perhaps take another step to end this for the Palestinians, for the people, for humanity?
It depends upon their will. If what's going on until now not enough for them to end this catastrophe, to end this genocide, I think all the world will not really accept what they are saying, what they are pretending all the time, speaking about democracy, speaking about human rights, speaking about international law. All those will be fallen, and others will practice the same way that the Israel is doing. It means power and force and violence will be the solution, and this is will give a very bad indicator for the world, and will be not. We will not witness stability. We will not witness security. We reach this level of type of life in the whole world, we should keep it. We should not go and push to have the jungle laws. This is not acceptable. This is not in favor of humanity in general. And the Palestinian issue is really now became as a sign if will be a solution or not. And this will be the indicator for the falling of the international law and the all conventions, including humanitarian law and human rights laws.
Ambassador, you spoke about international law. You spoke about, what about the role of ICJ and what we saw happen with regard to, South Africa, of course, and the way that, the Palestinian cause was taken up. Why has there not been any headway after this?
And until the International Criminal Court had been issued its decision, and they are asking to arrest the Prime Minister of Israel and the Minister of Defense. Now, who will apply this? This is the question. This is the main question that should be. All those states whom agreed for Rome Convention, whom signed this convention, should take action, should do something practically. It's not just the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister Netanyahu and his former defense minister. There is a new defense minister. There is many other ministers whom ask to end the existence of the Palestinian. What they are doing now, the starvation, preventing water from the people, preventing medicine, everything, what they are doing is something that should enhance and push all those who believe with law and humanity and take action and to arrest those and to send them for accountability in front of the court. This is the practical things that we should know. As I mentioned before, if this not will happen, it means what worth the existence of such a court.
Right, fair enough. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that there will be a solution, of course. Let me go to you. Joseph, if you heard what His Excellency Dr. Zuhair Zaid, Palestinian ambassador to Pakistan, said, he's talking about implementational issues. And, of course, the efficacy of ICJ, the efficacy of United Nations, the efficacy of global peacekeeping organizations have unfortunately come into question after what we've seen of the debacle in Palestine. In your opinion, what is that step? For a while we thought America, Trump, and now it seems that we are more or less where we were, or worse off.
Yeah, but unfortunately that's where the buck stops. If you would recall that in my very many previous commentaries on this issue, which has now lasted more than a year and a half, I have been saying that it doesn't suit Netanyahu to end the hostilities until, in his view, Hamas had been weakened to the extent where Israel would like to see. That has not happened, although Hamas has been damaged to a great extent, but still it has considerable strength. Now, right now, what we see is, unfortunately, there's a stalemate.
Right.
And Israelis have started the strikes again. About 400 people have been killed in recent strikes. And now Netanyahu is threatening that he would encircle Rafah again and start the military operations, or the ground military operations, in a big way. So that is back to the square one. The temporary ceasefire, and I had been very clear on that when there was a great wave of optimism that, okay, the ceasefire is there I had qualified it by saying that this is just a temporary phase, because what they're envisaging is a 3-stage ceasefire. Only the first stage has been agreed upon. And the problem is that the second stage, which was supposed to be negotiated during the first phase of the ceasefire,
Right.
is not going to happen, because the positions are so diametrically different. And that is exactly, we saw, unfortunately, all those sort of, predictions, unfortunately, that I had made have been borne out by the events on the ground.
Why has there, for the US and that, initial pressure that we saw, the initial claims of the Donald Trump administration, seemed for a while, like you said, to have been realized, except of course, people like you, and there was a general mistrust of what would happen. Why can't that be taken further on, in your opinion, if there is enough pressure, if there is enough sincerity, if there is enough will?
Okay, there are 2 or 3 issues here. First of all, the world has tried, sort of, the international opinion on this has been very strong. Then the United Nations had there were resolutions in the GA, the Security Council resolutions,
Right.
there were proceedings in the ICJ, ICC. All of that enhanced some pressure, but Netanyahu was able to take that pressure, and it failed. I had said it previously as well, repeatedly, that the only possibility of getting out of this situation is through the negotiations that the Americans are sponsoring.
Okay.
And it's only through those negotiations that we saw a temporary ceasefire. Now, I've mentioned the reason why the temporary ceasefire, because the phase 2, those negotiations never materialized, and the phase 2 was never agreed upon what to talk about the phase 3. Now, where we are presently, now, I think there are 3 or 4 important points here. Firstly, what is the Israeli position here? Now, what Israelis want, and I had mentioned that before as well, that Israelis don't want to coexist. There's not going to be a peaceful coexistence anymore between Israel and Hamas. That is one thing. So they want to see its capacity damaged to the extent, or sort of, degraded to the extent where it doesn't really matter there. That's one thing. The second thing is, Israelis want all their hostages to be released, and that is why Netanyahu had offered an extension of the phase 1 of the ceasefire, which had been agreed upon earlier on. Now, this is what the Israelis want. They want all the hostages back. And then he says, okay, I'll negotiate from there. But at the same time, he also wants Hamas's sort of, capacity to be almost entirely degraded. Now, what does Hamas want? Now, Hamas says that, okay, they want a permanent ceasefire and the release of the remaining hostages, which are about 60 in number, linked to that. Okay, and they're right now, they are also very intransigent on that. They don't want to negotiate on that any sort of, they're not showing any elasticity on that. Now, the US has proposed a third way out, which is being called a bridge deal. And what is that bridge deal? The bridge deal says that, okay, Hamas releases some hostages, and sort of, so in a way that the previously agreed temporary sort of ceasefire is extended, and then they start negotiating. But neither Israelis nor Hamas, for the time being, are agreeing on that, because the so-called bridge deal. So there is a stalemate. Now, what is going to happen from here is the Israelis are going to put increasing pressure by resuming their operations, which they've already done. Hamas is taking a beating, but at the same time, they think that because the more sort of innocent lives get lost, there'll be increasing sort of involvement from the world community. I mean, there are other countries which are involved as well, Qatar and Egypt. These are the 2 countries which are primarily involved, other than the US. In the sort of the so-called back channel diplomacy going on, but even they are not being very effective right now. Now, what I see is that, look, unfortunately, it's the Palestinian people who are suffering. It's the people living in Gaza who are suffering, and that is why, quite frankly, the public opinion there is neither for Israel, and nor it is entirely for Hamas, because there were recently demonstrations against Hamas as well. Yeah.
It is for the people that continue to suffer. It's for the humanity that.
Yeah, it's the two sides which are intransigent right now, and it is the people who are suffering. Now the US needs to put in probably like greater pressure. Again, unfortunately, even now what I can say is what I had said 6 months ago, and which partly worked for some time until it didn't, you know. But again, the international pressure is not really going to matter a lot, as it hasn't in the past. Any pressure from the UN or ICC or ICJ, Israel wouldn't care. There's actually internal pressure building in Israel as well, which has been building for a long time. But again, Netanyahu doesn't care. And why is that? Because Netanyahu's very survival is linked to this conflict. You know, because
so
of this
until
conflict.
he is removed or there is an alternative for him, unfortunately, he's not going to cave. It's essentially, you know, as far as this.
On the one hand, that is I mean, and we don't really see a possibility of his being removed from power, because you know he's riding this conflict in a way. On the other side, Hamas is adamant as well. You know, so they are still not willing to sort of, you know, after so much has happened, so many people have gotten, unfortunately, the innocent people, and mostly 2/3 of them are women and children.
Yes.
I mean, even their position has not diametrically sort of, you know, like altered. So I see it as a very tragic situation where the protagonists sort of, you know, are not really caring about the you know, the innocent victims. They're just taking them as a collateral damage, and that is the most unfortunate part of it.
Let me come back to you. We'll be taking a short break. After that, we'll come back and go to Naela on what, if there is any solution to the suffering in Palestine at this time. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking about Palestine and whether the suffering in Palestine can end, or is there an end to it anytime soon. I'm going to go to Naela. Naela, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you?
Naela, thank you for your patience. Overall, you know, as far as this bridge deal is concerned, Jauhar Saab talked about it, and you know, in your opinion, the kind of pressure that we saw initially come from the US, the reason, you know, because it is that one country that seems to matter for the suffering of so many people. Why has that receded so much? Is it, you know, why has the Palestinian cause gone on the back burner for the US? And is that likely to change anytime soon, in your opinion?
Well, Mahrukh, we have been talking about it in your program several times. It's a very unfortunate and very complicated situation. And what Ambassador Jauhar Saleem was talking about is the current development, summary of current developments, and then His Excellency the Palestine ambassador was also speaking about the ground realities there. Well, the fact of the matter, as I see it, is that this is with an agenda. This is not happening just like that. Whether it's Netanyahu or anyone else, we talk about Netanyahu because he's at this moment the head of the state of Israel and is implementing the agenda. But the ones before were doing it also, and the ones after him, if they exist, will continue to do so as well. And that is to have a greater Israel. The greater Israel, as they define, every time at UN when their leaders come, the map changes. And it grows bigger. And it engulfs more and more areas. So, since 1948, since the Balfour Declaration in 1917 and then its implementation further on, Israel has been, you know, displacing Palestinians. In 48, you might recall, 750,000 people were expelled. And then in 1967, and then so on and so forth. They have been going on with it because they believe, if you talk to an Israeli, they believe that when you speak of Palestine, you are actually denying Israel the right to exist. So they take it as an existential issue. By eliminating Palestine, only will they feel that they have the right to exist. But they have made themselves so, how would you say, illegitimate. They're totally illegitimate because it is in violation of every international law in the book. And how will they continue to implement? By their lobby in United States of America. They have been pumping money in the election campaigns of various American presidential, election campaigns. For Mr. Trump also, he came up with a deal. And then he turned around. The ceasefire was implemented. Now, this ceasefire is not of today. It is of 2 years. And they keep standing and asking for extension of phase 1. Why not phase 2? Because they don't want to withdraw their armies from the Gaza and other occupied lands of Palestine. Even now, Mr. Netanyahu was in the United States. He is even wanting attack on Iran. The Greater Israel includes the Abrahamic land which Hazrat Ibrahim and Hazrat Musa lived on, which is current Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, parts of Saudi Arabia. It has no end actually. So they will continue to implement that agenda. This is not just political, it's religious for them. They will not stop until the powers that are supporting them, giving them the capacity to do so, continue with their, I would say, complacency or continue with their support to Israel in implementation of its agenda. So what the leaders are saying is very different from what they are doing. There's a gap. And that gap is there because of inherent hypocrisy. Israel has tried to...
Naela, if you allow me to interject, what is it that, of course, the support for those, those voters that supported Donald Trump, and that allowed him to make those tall claims, that allowed him to intervene initially, isn't that support going to propel him to take a step further? Or you think, like you said, the Israeli lobby is just too strong in the US?
The Israeli lobby is bent upon preventing Trump to have any other ideas. They even tempted him to make commercial activity because, he is a man of trade and business, that Gaza will become a Riviera. They will have a Trump Plaza there. It kind of gives such ridiculous ideas which was rejected by the whole international community. But Israelis will continue with it by hooks or by crooks. They are not going to stop until the military support by United States stops. Even at the Biden time, you remember in your program I had told you that the arms agreement that they have with Israel, when Biden said they're going to stop arms, the agreement is valid till 2028. So even if Trump says today that they're going to stop arms, the agreement's implementation will continue till 2028. So long as they're pumping ammunition, long as they're pumping, weaponry there, Israelis will continue to use it and abuse it. Can you imagine, in Philippines, their former president was caught by International Criminal Court because warrants were, for his atrocities that he committed in his country. But for Israel, Netanyahu also has warrants against him for the war crimes he has committed But Israel rejects ICC, International Criminal Court. He totally rejects it. He rejects any international law. He calls it, even the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, Francesca Albanese, they tried to, choke her voice down, that she does not speak the reality on the ground, what Israel is doing. So the point that I'm trying to make is that if United States stops supporting Israel, the other Western countries will also be curtailed and Israel's activities will be limited. But until that happens, this will continue no matter what deals you talk about, no matter what documents to talk about, that inherent hypocrisy that this area has to be the greater Israel.
Okay, fair enough. But then, we come back to the same point, Jauhar Saab, that, the buck stops with the US. But what is it going to take for the US to throw its weight behind Palestine?
Well,
if anything at all.
Well, for that we need a dispassionate analysis in terms of international politics of the situation. Of course, our hearts go out for the victims, the innocent victims, the women and children and all those who had no part in this conflict but got killed and devastated in it, nevertheless. But in terms of this Palestinian issue, we have to remember 2 or 3 things, and these are important, very important, because without them we can't understand it. And we can just then literally we can lament on what is happening, but then we can't really come up with any sort of ideas as to what needs to be done or what could happen. Number one, if you don't understand where you are, you make mistakes, and that's what the Palestinians and the Arabs there have made. For instance, in 47, 48, what they could have gotten then, because they did not make an objective assessment of the situation there, they refused that, and they all went they went to war against Israel, and they were devastated. Israel was able to get many more lands than the United Nations was giving it, then. Subsequently, in 1967, again the same mistake. All these countries got together, they tried to get the lands back through military means, without realizing that they were in no they had no capacity. They were in no shape to actually do that, and then they lost a huge chunk, much bigger than what Israel had before that, and since 67. All the negotiations, and that is the most critical point here, all the negotiations and all the demands are only to get the land which they already had before 1967, right? Okay, then in the 73 war, Egyptians they negotiated separately, and they were able to get the Sinai Peninsula back and some other lands back and everything, and then there were the Oslo Accords. But the point is that the bargaining position of the Palestinians, the time has not, has been against them, and that has been weakening ever since, and they don't realize that, unfortunately, and that is one thing. The second thing is, okay, we could all have in this situation, I think rightfully so, perhaps have a victim mentality, and and the injustice is being carried out, international law is being flouted, and that is all true. But the fact is, would that matter? If that would not matter, then you have to see how to in terms of sheer international politics, in terms of the real politics of the situation, how to negotiate, because right now what is happening is the Hamas is trying to they have a zero-sum attitude as well. They're from a position of weakness. They're trying to bargain something that is not possible.
You're saying that they need to be more realistic.
I think so. On the other hand, Israelis also, I think there needs to be greater pressure on Netanyahu, because he has taken this battle as the battle of his political survival. He's using it for that, and for him all politics is local. I think there has to be, and unfortunately that is the reality in Israel today as well, that Israel is not democratic to the extent that it was. If Israel had been as democratic as it was like 2-3 decades ago, Netanyahu would not have been able to get away with all this. Now, thirdly, in the US, what we see is, okay, in the US there's a bipartisan support for Israel's security and sort of, but that support is even greater on the side of Republicans. It was Trump who had negotiated the Abraham Accords.
So for the Palestinian, Trump was the best bet.
No, what I'm saying is that the Trump actually has a better personal rapport with Netanyahu than the sort of Biden's or the Clintons or anybody else had. Now this does two things. First of all, it's Palestinians. I mean, for the Palestinian side, they have to understand that Trump is going to go all the way, if not all the way, he's going to go with Netanyahu to the extent that probably even Biden would not have. That's one thing. But on the other hand, that close rapport with Netanyahu also gives him the possibility of sort of being more effective, right? So I think it is very important because whatever we may say.
But that's what they thought initially, and that's why there was the first step was taken. Yeah,
the first step was taken, but I think from their side also they have to show more flexibility, because without that, unfortunately, what will happen is Israel, in terms of military capacity, there's no sort of comparison there. Sort of any of the neighbors. Would the Egyptians intervene? Would there, any Jordanians? None of these countries has the military capacity or the political capacity to intervene in any meaningful way. All they can do is to help in terms of the negotiation, which the Americans are conducting. Basically that, and they have been supporting that. Israel has come up, Egypt has come up with a good idea, the Egyptian plan, which has become the Arab plan, which was endorsed by the OIC as well, which has been endorsed by Pakistan as well. Right. That's a good plan, actually. In my view, it was a good way out. But then sort of, the Israelis dismissed it outrightly. Americans initially rejected it, but subsequently they showed some flexibility on that. But then the intransigence of Netanyahu sort of, did not allow it to take off. Right. But I think this US bridge plan, the so-called bridge plan, needs to be seriously considered by both the sides, because right now,
there seems to be no other option.
Right now, there's no other option on the table.
Unfortunately, we're also running out of time. I'm going to go to Naela. Naela, a quick question. As far as Netanyahu is concerned and the power within Israel, the situation within Israel, isn't there any chance of his power dwindling or there being, opposition against him within Israel?
Well, his power is being, even now there are manifestations against his actions within Israel. But the point is that deep down they're all on the same platform. So Netanyahu is being criticized by the Palestinians, but still they're, not throwing him off, because they know this is their survival. This is how they're going to expand their land. So Netanyahu, like Ambassador Jauhar said, for him, it is very important for his political career. But having said that, while there are manifestations, deep down, I think the Jews, the Zionists, the Israelis, they are all, in cahoots with what's going on. They don't really consider Palestinians as humans, and therefore do not believe in their right to exist, and are willing to go to any extent. Even you could see these, videos that are coming out where the Israeli defense forces are enjoying and partying while Palestinians are dying. So that inhuman attitude has become part of their DNA, as I see it, the Zionists. Of course, there's some good Jews too, but what is happening right now, Netanyahu's support is very strong.
Thank you for joining us today. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for being with us. Jauhar Saleem, thank you for joining us today. Overall, of course, like Naela said, things seems to have surpassed humanity as far as the situation in Gaza, as far as Palestine is concerned. And certainly while countries that rally behind like Egypt, like of course Pakistan is also one of those countries. We saw what happened in South Africa also. But those that matter seem to not be on the side of humanity, not be on the side of the women and children that are continued to be butchered every day. One hopes that some sense will prevail. One hopes the international pressure will be of a nature that it will be impossible for countries like the US to ignore this and move towards a lasting solution. Also, like Ambassador Jauhar said, perhaps the bridge plan can be re-evaluated, and perhaps there can be some kind of an agreement by tweaking that and under the US, because there seems to be little or no other option for those that die every day in Palestine. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.